Forget last night. It never happened. Vivian Sterling said it like an order, but her hand shook as she pulled the white sheet tighter around her body. Across the penthouse, Mason Hayes stood by the glass wall in his janitor's uniform, the sunrise turning Chicago gold behind him while the envelope of cash on the nightstand stayed untouched. He was a poor single father who had come upstairs to clean champagne stains not wake beside a billionaire CEO with mascara on her cheeks and panic in her eyes. Last night, Vivian had been drunk enough to tell the truth, but sober enough to choose him, and Mason had believed for one dangerous hour that she saw the man beneath the uniform. Now she wanted to erase him before the board, the press, and her perfect empire could find out. Mason thought of Avery sleeping in their cramped apartment, then walked away without the money. Vivian watched the freight elevator close, certain silence would bury everything. But 6 weeks later, in a private clinic across town, she stared at a pregnancy test, and the secret she tried to buy became impossible to hide. And Mason would soon learn the truth, too. Mason Hayes did not take the main elevator at Sterling Meridian, even when the lobby was empty, and the marble floors shone beneath the midnight lights. Men like him were not forbidden from using it, not officially, but buildings had rules no one printed. Executives went up through brass doors and quiet music. Janitors went through the freight lift behind the service corridor where the air smelled of bleached cardboard and old metal. Mason preferred it. The freight lift did not pretend to respect him. It simply carried him where he needed to go. At 34, Mason had learned to appreciate honest things. He pushed his cleaning cart inside, pressed the button for the 40th floor, and checked his phone before the doors rattled shut. A message from Mrs. Alvarez, his neighbor, waited on the screen. Avery fell asleep after 2 pages. Lunchboxes on the counter. Mason smiled despite the ache behind his eyes. His 7-year-old daughter loved pretending she was too grown for bedtime stories, but she never lasted past the 2nd page. He typed back, "Thank you. I owe you," then slipped the phone into his pocket. He had been awake since 6, moving from Avery's school to Ruth's clinic to overdue bills to dinner to spelling words before reporting to work. That was normal. Mason did not complain about normal days. Sterling Meridian Group owned 40 floors of glass, steel, and controlled ambition in downtown Chicago. To Mason, it was bathrooms, conference rooms, kitchens, and trash compactors. He had cleaned the building for 14 months. Most people called him Buddy if they called him anything. They did not hate him. They simply did not see him. That invisibility paid $4 more per hour on the overnight shift, and those $4 helped keep Avery in clean shoes and Ruth on her medications. It was past 2 when his supervisor, Glenn, stopped him near the service closet with a look that meant the answer had already been decided. The executive penthouse party had ended messily, and the morning team was not allowed to see it. Mason had to clean what could be cleaned and be gone before 6. Quietly, Glenn said, as if Mason had ever done anything loudly in that building. Mason nodded, took fresh liners, and rode up alone. The penthouse opened with a private service code Glenn had written on a receipt. Inside, champagne lilies, perfume, and expensive exhaustion hung in the air. Glasses crowded the wet bar napkins twisted on the floor, and one woman's heel rested near the sofa like evidence. Mason started with the glasses. He moved carefully. He would clean the living area, empty the trash, leave the bedroom for the day staff, and go home in time to make Avery pancakes. Then he heard a sound from the bedroom. Not a scream. Not even a word. It was the small, broken sound of someone trying not to cry. Mason froze with a tray in his hands. Every rule in the building told him to ignore it. Rich people's pain was dangerous to poor people. Still, he set down the tray and walked to the half-open door. Vivian Sterling lay across the king-size bed in a silver evening dress, one arm over her eyes, dark hair loosened from whatever perfect shape it had held during the party. Mason knew her face from magazine covers and the framed photograph beside reception. Vivian Sterling, 32, billionaire, CEO, impossible standard. Now she looked like a person who had run out of places to hide. Mason stepped back. "Ma'am," he said softly. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was still here." Vivian lowered her arm. Her eyes were glossy but focused. She looked at his uniform, the trash bag in his hand, then his face. Embarrassment sharpened her expression, then collapsed into weariness. "Of course," she whispered. "Even my disasters come with staff." Mason did not answer. He turned to leave, but she said, "Wait." The word was not an order. That was what stopped him. Vivian pushed herself upright, winced, and reached for water that was not there. Mason went to the small bar, filled a clean tumbler, and placed it on the nightstand. He kept his eyes where they belonged. "You should drink this," he said, "and maybe sleep." Vivian gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. Sleep is for people who can afford to stop thinking. Mason almost smiled. "Then I know a lot of rich insomniacs." The line surprised both of them. Vivian looked at him more closely, as if noticing the man in the doorway had a life outside the service hallway. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mason Hayes." "Do you always talk to CEOs like that, Mason Hayes?" "Only when they're sitting beside an untouched glass of water at 2:30 in the morning." Something changed in her expression. Not softness exactly, but the first crack in the glass around her. She drank the water. Mason went back to collecting glasses. He should have left, but Vivian asked another question, and then another. Did he work nights? Did he have a family? Did he hate the building? Mason answered only the safe parts at first. Yes, he worked nights. Yes, he had a daughter. No, he did not hate the building. Buildings were easier than people. Vivian laughed at that, and this time it sounded real. She told him the party had been for a merger. Everyone praised her for closing, though half the men there had wanted her to sell the company she had rebuilt. She said people loved calling her powerful because it excused them from asking if she was lonely. Mason should not have understood that, but he did. He thought of Avery's refrigerator drawing two stick figures beneath the words, "Daddy always stays," and of Ruth pretending her pain was only tiredness. "People do that when they need you to keep performing," he said. "They clap so they don't have to help." Vivian stared at him. The silence after that sentence was longer than it should have been. It was also the first silence of the night that did not feel empty. They talked until the city outside began to fade from black to blue. Vivian was drunk enough that her polished defenses had loosened, but not so drunk that she did not know where she was, who he was, or what she was asking when she told him not to leave yet. Mason knew the difference. He had watched his late wife laugh through wine at anniversaries and seen men become strangers after too much whiskey. Vivian was tired, sad and bruised by champagne, but her eyes were clear when she reached for his hand. He said her name like a warning. She said his like a choice. What happened after that did not feel like opportunity, not to Mason. It felt like two people stepping over a line they both saw clearly. By morning, fear had returned. Mason stood near the windows in the gray light, buttoning his uniform with unsteady hands. Vivian sat against the pillows, wrapped in a sheet, looking younger than any billionaire had a right to look. For one moment, neither spoke. Then she saw the uniform, the cart, the empty glasses, the impossible distance, and panic came into her face like a door slamming. "Forget last night," she said. "It never happened." Mason did not move. Vivian reached for her handbag, pulled out an envelope, and set it on the nightstand. The motion was quick, almost desperate. "For your trouble," she said, and hated herself before the words finished leaving her mouth. Mason looked at the envelope, then he looked at her. He had been ignored, corrected, and underpaid before. This hurt differently because for a few hours he had believed she had seen him. "My trouble?" he asked. Vivian's face tightened. "Mason, please. This is complicated." "No," he said quietly. "Money is simple. That's why people use it when they don't want to say the hard thing." Her eyes filled, but she did not apologize. Pride held her still. Fear did the rest. Mason picked up his jacket, left the envelope where it was, and walked out through the service hallway. He rode the freight elevator down with his hands closed into fists, then drove home through streets washed pale by morning. In his apartment, Avery slept curled on the sofa, one sock missing her stuffed rabbit under her chin. The sight pulled Mason back into the life he understood. Mrs. Alvarez had left a note beside the lunchbox. She was good. Don't worry so much. Mason almost laughed. Worry was the one thing he could still afford. He showered, changed, and made pancakes from a mix that had expired 2 months earlier but still smelled fine. Avery woke to the sound of the skillet and padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "You came home," she murmured. "I always do," Mason said. She wrapped her arms around his waist and leaned against him, trusting the sentence completely. That trust made his chest ache. He told himself the penthouse was over. Vivian Sterling belonged to headlines boardrooms and cars waiting at curbs. Mason Hayes belonged to overdue Bill's school drop-off hospital corridors and the freight elevator. For 3 days, both of them tried to obey that rule. Vivian walked into Sterling Meridian each morning in tailored suits and perfect makeup. Mason cleaned the executive floors after dark and avoided the penthouse level unless ordered there. Neither called the other. Neither slept well. On the 4th day, Mason received a call from Ruth's clinic. The outstanding balance on her treatment account had been paid in full by an anonymous third party. Mason felt a stone drop into his stomach. He sat in his parked car outside Avery's school, staring at his cracked phone, and knew exactly who had done it. It was generous. It was cruel. It saved his mother and tied his gratitude to the woman who had tried to pay him away. He did not call Vivian. He could not trust what his voice might do. Weeks passed. Vivian told herself the payment was practical, not emotional. Mason told himself silence was dignity, not cowardice. Avery kept drawing her father with impossibly broad shoulders, as if crayon could make him strong enough to carry everything. Then, 6 weeks after the penthouse, Vivian sat alone in a private clinic across town under a name no one at Sterling Meridian would recognize. She had blamed the nausea on stress, the dizziness on meetings, and the exhaustion on another acquisition. But the doctor spoke gently, and the paper in Vivian's hand left no room for negotiation. Pregnant. Vivian read the word 3 times. The room seemed to shrink around her. She thought of Mason's hand pulling away from the envelope of the freight elevator closing of the life he already carried with a daughter who needed him and a mother who depended on him. She thought of the board, the press, her last name, the scandal, and the tiny, impossible heartbeat changing every calculation she had ever trusted. Her first instinct was not to call him. It was to protect him, or so she told herself. Mason was poor. He was a single father. He had enough weight on his back. Dragging him into her world would not be kindness. It would be destruction. Vivian folded the result into her purse and made her first decision as a mother with the same fatal flaw that had shaped her life as a CEO. That choice would soon cost more than she could ever imagine. She decided alone. Vivian Sterling discovered that pregnancy did not announce itself dramatically at first. It arrived as small betrayals. Coffee, once the only thing that could carry her through 7 o'clock board calls, suddenly tasted like metal. The scent of lilies in the executive lobby made her stomach twist. Her tailored jackets felt too tight by noon, and twice in 1 week she ended meetings early with explanations so polished no one dared question them. Mara Keene, her assistant, noticed everything and said almost nothing, which Vivian appreciated until silence became another mirror. Mason noticed too, though he tried not to. He did not ask whether she was sick. He knew what it meant to guard a secret with your whole body. So one morning after finishing the 39th floor, he stopped at the basement cafeteria and bought ginger tea in a plain paper cup. He left it outside Vivian's office door before dawn and walked away before anyone could connect it to him. By the fourth morning, Vivian opened her door before he reached the service closet. The tea sat between them on the carpet, warm and harmless, and impossible to misunderstand. "You don't have to do this," she said. Mason held his trash liner loosely in one hand. "I know." "Then why are you—" "Because you look like mornings are getting hard." Vivian's mouth tightened, but anger would have been easier than the ache his gentleness put in her chest. "You don't know anything about my mornings." Mason nodded. "That's true." He started to leave, and that restraint irritated her more than any demand could have. "Mason." He stopped. "If this is about what happened upstairs, you need to understand that I am handling it." He looked back at her calm but not cold. "I never said you weren't." "Then stop acting like you are part of it." For the first time, something crossed his face that was not patience. "I was part of it when you wanted someone to see you. I guess I stopped being part of it when daylight came." Vivian had no answer. Mason left, and she picked up the tea with hands that shook despite her best effort. At home, Avery noticed the change in her father before Mason noticed it in himself. He burned grilled cheese, forgot to sign her reading log, and stared too long at bills he had already paid. One night, she climbed into the kitchen chair across from him and pushed a drawing across the table. It showed Mason with arms twice as wide as his body, Avery holding one hand a tiny house behind them, and the words, "Daddy always stays," written in purple crayon. Mason smiled because she needed him to, then asked why she had written that. Avery shrugged. "Because you do." The simplicity of it broke something open in him. He folded the drawing carefully and placed it on the refrigerator where it watched him every morning like a promise. At Sterling, Meridian promises were worth less than rumors. The first one reached Mason through a maintenance worker named Travis, who said it with the embarrassed curiosity of a man repeating gossip he pretended not to believe. People were saying the janitor on the executive floors had gotten too friendly with Vivian Sterling. Others said he had figured out she was sick and was trying to make himself useful. By lunch, the story had changed into something uglier. Mason Hayes, poor widower single dad, was using his sad little family story to get close to a billionaire. Mason did not defend himself. Defense required explaining, and explaining would drag Avery's name into mouths that had not earned it. Instead, he stopped leaving tea. Vivian felt the missing tea before she admitted she missed Mason. Yet the absence of one paper cup outside her office made the entire floor feel colder. She tried to focus on investor reports, but the numbers blurred. At 11 that night, she returned from a private appointment with a folder tucked inside her bag. She set the bag on her desk, took a call from Helena Ward, the oldest member of her board, and turned toward the window while discussing risk exposure in a voice that revealed nothing. When the call ended, the folder was on the floor. Its clasp had slipped open. Mason stood near the recycling bin, frozen in a stillness too careful to be innocent. Vivian crossed the room and snatched the papers up, but the first page had already faced upward long enough. Prenatal confirmation. Estimated gestational age, 6 weeks. "You saw," she said. Mason did not insult her by lying. "Enough." "Then forget it." "Vivian?" "No." Her voice cracked, and she hated that more than anything. "This is not your problem. I have doctors. I have money. I have people who can make sure this stays contained." Mason's jaw tightened. "Contained? That is not what I meant." "It sounded exactly like what you meant." She pressed the folder against her chest as if paper could protect her. "You have Avery. You have your mother. You are barely holding your life together." "Mason, I am not going to drop this on you and call it fairness." He took one step closer, not enough to threaten, only enough to stop being dismissed. "You don't get to decide what my life can hold. I am trying to protect you." "No," he said, and the quietness of it made her flinch. "You're trying to control the damage. There's a difference." Vivian looked away. Mason's voice softened, but it did not weaken. "I've been a father before. I know what it costs. It costs sleep, pride, plans, money. You don't have mornings when you're scared and still packing lunch because a child doesn't care that your heart is breaking. It costs everything. But if that baby is mine, you don't get to make me a stranger because I'm poor." The room went silent. Outside, Chicago glittered like it had never hurt anyone. Vivian whispered, "Avery deserves peace. Avery deserves a father who doesn't disappear when truth gets expensive." Vivian could not breathe around that sentence. Mason turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "When you're ready to talk to me instead of around me, you know where I work." He left the office, and for the first time since the clinic, Vivian cried without trying to turn away from herself. The story broke 3 days later. A financial blog published a blind item about a powerful Chicago CEO, a secret pregnancy, and an inappropriate relationship with a building employee. By 3, every person in Sterling Meridian knew exactly who the employee was. Glenn moved him to basement duty until things cooled down. The phrase sounded practical, but Mason heard what it meant: disappear where investors would not see you. The worst came from Avery's school. A boy in her class had heard his mother whispering and asked if Avery's dad was trying to steal money from a rich lady. That evening, Avery sat through dinner without touching her pasta. Finally, she looked at Mason with wet, suspicious eyes. "Daddy, did you do something bad?" Mason felt the question like a hand around his throat. He knelt in front of her chair. "I made mistakes grown-ups make when they are lonely and confused," he said carefully. "But I did not lie to get money. I did not hurt anyone on purpose. And I will never do anything that makes you something to be ashamed of." Then she nodded and pressed her forehead against his. Mason held her until his knees ached. Across town, Vivian was being measured in percentages. Sterling Meridian's stock dropped 4 points before closing. Every point felt like a hand pushing her closer to the lie they wanted signed tomorrow. Investors requested reassurance. Public relations drafted statements. The board scheduled an emergency session and sent Vivian a document that described cruelty in clean corporate language. It denied any personal involvement with Mason, affirmed strict professional boundaries, and expressed confidence that outside parties had misrepresented harmless workplace interactions. It would end the story fast. It would also make Mason look like a liar who had invented intimacy to climb toward money. Mara stood by the door, pale with fury she was too professional to release. "They expect you to sign before Thursday," she said. Vivian stared at the line reserved for her name. "Of course they do. Are you going to—" Vivian did not answer. That same night, Ruth Hayes collapsed at home and was taken to Mercy General. Mason spent 2 days moving between her bed, Avery's school, and the basement locker room, where he changed into a uniform that suddenly felt like a warning label. Ruth knew less than he feared and more than he wanted. On her last clear afternoon, she squeezed his hand and said, "You have been carrying life like it's a punishment." Mason tried to tell her to rest, but she shook her head. "Listen, being poor means people will try to make your silence convenient. Don't help them. Avery watches what you accept." She died before sunrise. Later, in the drawer beside her bed, Mason found a letter written in her careful handwriting. It said she was proud of the father he had become, but she begged him not to confuse sacrifice with vanishing. A decent man did not need a fortune to stand beside his child. Mason folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket. Vivian heard about Ruth from Mara and sat very still for a long time. On Thursday morning, the board statement lay on her desk beside a pen, heavy enough to feel like a verdict. Signing would save her company, or at least the version of it everyone expected her to protect. Then she noticed behind a stack of reports the last ginger tea Mason had left before the rumors chased him away. It was empty now, but the cup remained plain and cheap, and more honest than every sentence in the document. Vivian picked up the pen. She imagined Avery asking whether her father had done something bad. She imagined Mason in the basement erased for being poor. She imagined the child inside her growing beneath a lie signed in her own name. Then she set the pen down. She found Mason near the service entrance after his shift, grief hollowing his face but not his spine. "I didn't sign it," she said. Mason looked at her for a long moment. "Why not?" Vivian swallowed. "Because you were right. I kept calling it protection, but I was deciding for you because I was afraid you might choose differently than I needed." Mason did not forgive her immediately, and she did not ask him to. "The board meets tomorrow," she continued. "They may try to remove me if I refuse." Mason touched the folded letter in his pocket. "Then we stop letting them tell the story without us." Vivian nodded, terrified and strangely calm. For the first time since the penthouse, neither of them walked away. The next morning, Vivian Sterling entered the 38th floor boardroom with the unsigned statement inside a black folder. The room felt colder than usual, perhaps because for the first time in years, she had not rehearsed every answer. 12 directors sat around the long glass table. Helena Ward sat near the windows, expression unreadable. At the far end, Warren Pike tapped one finger beside his copy of the statement. Mara stood against the wall with a tablet pretending to take notes while watching Vivian with worried eyes. Vivian sat and placed the folder before her. Warren did not wait for pleasantries. He said the company's position was deteriorating. Shareholders expected discipline, and Vivian's private choices could no longer remain private if they threatened Sterling Meridian's stability. He spoke of Mason without saying Mason's name. He called him the employee in question, the building worker, the source of reputational exposure. Each phrase landed like a disinfected insult. Then Warren leaned back and said, "This company cannot be dragged down by a janitor with a complicated home life." The room went still. Vivian felt the child inside her not as movement, but as presence, as if some quiet witness had entered before anyone invited it. She looked at Warren and saw the machinery beneath the language. They were afraid because Mason was poor, because Avery existed, because a man who emptied trash cans had stepped into a story that people in rooms like this preferred to own. Vivian finally opened the folder. The statement waited there, clean, controlled, cowardly. Before she could touch the pen, the boardroom doors opened. The assistant outside protested, but Mason Hayes stepped in anyway. He wore a white shirt ironed badly at the collar, dark slacks, and the same work shoes he used in the service corridors. His face carried grief exhaustion and something steadier than either. In his jacket pocket, his mother's letter rested folded against his chest. Every person at the table turned toward him as if someone had rolled a mop bucket into a church. Warren stood. "This is a closed meeting." Mason stopped just inside the doors. "I know." "Then you have no right to be here." Vivian spoke before Mason could answer. Her voice was quiet, but it traveled across the table like glass breaking. "I invited him." Warren stared at her. "You did what?" "I said I invited him. And as chair of this meeting, I am granting him the floor." Mason looked at her once, not with surprise, but with recognition. Then he faced the board. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "I know most of you have already decided what I am." No one answered. "I'm the night janitor. I'm the man who rides the freight elevator so I don't make people uncomfortable in the front lobby. I'm the widower with a little girl. I'm the employee whose name sounds inconvenient beside hers." He nodded toward Vivian. "All of that is true. I clean floors here. I count grocery money before I buy fruit. I ask my neighbor to watch my daughter while I work nights. My mother died this week, and I came here wearing the best shirt I own. If those facts make me smaller in your eyes, I can't stop that." Mason's voice stayed even. but I will not let anyone here turn my poverty into proof of dishonor. I did not sell a story to the press. I did not threaten Vivian Sterling. I did not ask her for money. When she put cash on a table after the night, everyone keeps whispering about I left it there. Not because I am proud in some dramatic way, but because my daughter has to live with the kind of man I teach her to recognize. Vivian looked down, pain moving through her face before she mastered it. Mason continued. For weeks, I stayed quiet because I thought silence would protect Avery. Then she came home from school and asked if her daddy had done something bad. A child should not have to ask that because adults with power need someone poor enough to blame. The sentence changed the air. If this child Vivian carries is mine, Mason said slower now, then I have a responsibility. Not because I want a title money or a place at this table. I am asking you not to sign me out of my child's life because the truth looks bad in a quarterly report. I buried one woman who taught me a decent man does not need permission from wealthy people to stand beside his family. I am here because my children, both of them, deserve a father who does not vanish when powerful people call his existence inconvenient. Vivian closed her eyes for one breath. When she opened them, Mason had finished. He did not bow his head. He simply stepped back. Warren began to speak, but Vivian rose. Every eye shifted from Mason to her. This was the moment she had feared, not because she did not know what to say, but because she did. Mason Hayes did not exploit me. Not, Vivian said. He did not manipulate me, threaten me, or pursue money from me. The night being discussed happened between two consenting adults, and the morning after I was the one who tried to reduce him to something I could manage. I put an envelope on a table because I was afraid. He left without touching it. Warren's face hardened. Vivian, this is not helpful. No, she said. It is not helpful to the lie. She picked up the statement. This document says Sterling Meridian maintains professional boundaries and that outside parties misrepresented harmless workplace interactions. That sentence is designed to make Mason look unstable, dishonest, or opportunistic. I will not put my name on it. Elaine Foster leaned forward. You are prioritizing emotion over fiduciary duty. Vivian looked at her. I am prioritizing truth over panic. There is a difference. The stock is down. Stocks recover from scandal. People do not always recover from being publicly erased. Her hand moved to her stomach. I am pregnant. I will not turn this child into a headline. But Mason has the right to know the right to choose and the right to stand beside that child if he chooses to. No board resolution can make him less of a father. Silence followed. Warren looked as if he had been slapped with language too plain to dispute. Elaine glanced at Helena. Helena finally spoke. The proposed statement is dead. Warren turned on her. Helena. No, Helena said. The market will survive uncertainty. It may not survive a CEO coerced into a public falsehood that can be disproven by the very man we would be attempting to discredit. When did this board become comfortable treating a working man as disposable because his presence embarrasses us? Warren opened his mouth, then closed it. Helena turned to Vivian. You will need legal review protection for Mr. Hayes and his daughter and a governance plan. Those are real issues. But destroying him is cowardice dressed in risk management. Vivian felt something inside her loosen, not victory, but the first inch of air after being underwater. The vote to force the statement failed to move forward. Warren objected. Elaine abstained. Helena requested a 30-day review, and the board agreed to acknowledge a personal matter without naming Mason, deny coercion or exploitation, and investigate the leak. Vivian remained CEO, not untouched, not safe, but standing. When the meeting ended, Mason waited near the elevator as if unsure whether he should use the one beside the boardroom or return to the freight lift. Vivian walked to him. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, Mason replied. Maybe not for them. For Avery. Vivian nodded. And for the baby. His expression changed at the word, as if the idea had been real in principle until her voice made it human. Yes, he said. For the baby. Downstairs, Mara arrived with Avery from school. Mason had not wanted her there, but Mara had said children heard enough from hallways and adults who whispered. Sometimes they deserved to see the truth for themselves. Avery stood near the reception desk in a yellow cardigan, clutching her backpack straps, eyes moving from her father to Vivian. Mason went to her immediately and knelt. "You okay, Bug?" Avery nodded, then looked past him. "Is that her?" Vivian walked closer slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. She crouched so she was not above the child. "I'm Vivian," she said. Avery studied her with the hard suspicion only children could show when protecting someone they loved. "Did you make my dad sad?" Vivian's throat tightened. "Yes," she said. "I did. I was scared, and I made choices that hurt him. I'm sorry." Avery looked at Mason. Mason did not rescue Vivian from the silence. Vivian continued. "Your dad did not do anything bad. He told the truth when people wanted him to stay quiet. You should be proud of him." Avery's chin trembled, but she lifted it. "I am." Mason pulled her close, and the lobby blurred around the small circle of a father holding his child. Vivian stood unsure if she belonged inside that circle yet. Then Avery reached one hand out without looking. Vivian took it carefully. The next weeks were not easy. Stories still ran. Sterling Meridian's stock dipped again, then stabilized when Helena led the governance review and the internal leak was traced to Warren's office. He resigned before the investigation became public. Glenn restored Mason's position and was warned that retaliation would end his career faster than any scandal could. Mason returned to the executive floors, but he no longer moved like a man trying not to disturb the air. He still cleaned well. He still used the freight elevator because it was closer to his supply closet, not because he believed he belonged out of sight. Vivian did not pretend honesty solved everything. She and Mason argued about doctors, privacy money schedules, and whether Avery needed counseling. They learned each other in daylight where romance had to survive grocery lists and legal forms. But they came back. That was the difference. Months later, on a rainy afternoon, Mason stood outside a hospital room with Avery pressed against his side. Vivian was inside, exhausted, laughing through tears, and the newborn's cry had just filled the hallway. Avery looked up at him. "So I'm really a big sister now." Mason wiped his face and smiled. "Yes, and this time, nobody has to hide." When the nurse finally let them in, Vivian looked at Mason first, then at Avery, then down at the baby wrapped against her chest. No empire fell. No miracle made Mason rich. No apology erased what had hurt. But the child opened tiny fingers around Mason's thumb, and Vivian watched the poor janitor she had once tried to pay away become exactly what he had always been, a father who stayed. Later, when Mason walked through Sterling Meridian's lobby with Avery on one side and Vivian carrying their son on the other, people looked. Some whispered. Some smiled. Mason did not lower his eyes. He had never needed a boardroom, a bank account, or a billionaire's last name to make him worthy. He had only needed the world to stop mistaking his humility for shame, and he had forced it to look.